his idea was that I should be the NAACP candidate for president. And he actually listed my name. And when Kennedy came to the Civic Auditorium in Albuquerque to give a political speech, I was terrified somebody was going to ask me to make a speech, but nobody did. But certainly I was listed. I was in Hong Kong by the time the elections came along. But I don't actually know, I don't know whether I got any votes at all. Nobody bothered to report to me. But the point was, they wanted to establish that you could list somebody for President of the United States without checking on the background. And of course, there was one person in America who in a month's time will be 100, who wanted more than anybody else ever wanted to be president, and that was Henry Kissinger. And when I finally met him, and I'll tell you this now because I think it's quite an interesting story, it was very much later, it was 1989, almost the end of the Soviet Union. And Pierre Cardin had invited a Russian rock opera to play performances at the city centre in New York. And I arrived in New York, that was on a Sunday night. I arrived on Friday and found invitations from Cardin to attend. And it was a black tie affair. I went out and bought a black tie, but I had a new silk shirt and I had a suit with a very fine silver stripe that, you know, looked like a tuxedo. And anyway, I accepted the invitation and went along. And I found myself sitting next but one to Cardin himself, and lots of high society New Yorkers trying to speak to me in French, which I sort of, I managed to hold them off until the curtain went up. And there was a dinner afterwards, and must have been about 30 people round the table, and Cardin owned Maxine's, so it was at Maxine's. And in the American manner, although he was French, the person who'd come the furthest was the guest of honor. So he sat at one end of the table, I sat at the other end of the table. And on either side of me were two friends who I've been thinking about the past year or so very much. But I didn't know them until then. On one side of me, with his wife, was the Ukrainian ambassador to the UN, and on the other side was the Soviet ambassador to the UN. And we were about 1/3 through the dinner, and suddenly a couple who had another engagement and couldn't see the show, but they wanted to come to the dinner and meet people. They came into the room, and a sort of short, tubby husband and a tall wife in a boiler suit. And instead of going to Cardin, he came to me. "Oh, you're Martyn Naylor," he said.